Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Ashley Early and I support the National Business Development Team with GuideStar. We are excited to have you all join us today to learn 6 best practices for implementing a GuideStar API. Before we begin, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. While our co-presenter, Emily Iarocci from CyberGrant, will be asking us some great questions on GuideStar APIs, we have blocked off a period of time at the end of today's event to answer any additional questions. We want to make sure to address any and all questions you might have, so if we are not able to get to them today, we will follow up via email within a few short days. To submit a question, simply navigate to the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. Depending on your computer, it may not be showing right now. If it isn't, simply look for the Q&A button near the top or bottom right-hand corner of your screen and select it to activate that box. Feel free to submit questions, especially technical questions that come to mind as you have them. Lastly, don't worry if you missed a point or were unable to write down a note. We are recording today's event and you will receive that recording via email within a few days to watch as many times as you'd like. And with that, I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Shane Ward and Emily Iarocci. As GuideStar's data architect, Shane Ward focuses on the design and implementation of GuideStar's next generation data architecture that will incorporate both traditional data warehousing techniques as well as big data principles, tools, and analytics. Shane believes that today's emerging technologies can empower users and be the driving force behind change and innovation in the social sector. Shane has been working in the nonprofit sector for 10 years. Our co-presenter is Emily Iarocci, who has worked in marketing and training roles in biotech and internet search. Emily has been with CyberGrant since the year 2000 and currently manages key global accounts and strategic company initiatives as the company's Vice President of Marketing and Communications. Emily represents CyberGrant at industry meetings such as GMN and Council on Foundations. We are thrilled to welcome Emily. Without any further ado, let's get started. Shane and Emily, take it away.
Thank you, Ashley. I hope everyone can hear me okay, and please bear with me. This is my first webinar. So, quick agenda setup for you guys is we're just going to briefly overview our GuideStar APIs. We'll go over some high-level best practices, and then we'll take some questions from Emily and then open it up to you all for an open forum of Q&A. Hopefully I have all the answers, and if I don't, I'll be sure to get back to you with the answers that I find. So we're GuideStar, the world's largest source of nonprofit information. As you know, our mission is to make philanthropy easier, try to drive grants and donation dollars to those organizations that are effective in the sector and making change in the sector. Our data comes in from GuideStar from many different sources. A lot of them are IRS sources, a business master file, publication 78, but we also have data from the nonprofits themselves through our exchange profile program or just our nonprofit profile program. We also integrate some reviews and expert analysis and then push all of that data downstream through what we call our data distribution network. That is GuideStar.org, that is our platform through APIs, and we have various white label solutions as well. Today we're going to be talking about APIs. As many of you already know, APIs is an extremely efficient way of pushing data across the internet. Since all it is data, that leaves the customization and the automation and the integration up to you. How do you want it to integrate into your platform? All we're going to do is provide the data to you through these APIs. The data that comes through our APIs is the same data that you'll see on GuideStar.org. Either it comes from the business master file, or digitized 990 information, or self-reported nonprofit data through our nonprofit profile program. Today, there we go. We have 4 different APIs we'll talk about right now in our product. The Cherry Check API, which I think a lot of you are already familiar with. That's the one-stop shop to find an organization's sort of legal standing, if you will. That data comes from the business master file, comes from Publication 78 data, IRB data, OFAC data. I think there's 7 different data sources. And our search API is just that. It's for search. You type in a keyword, you type in an organization name, and you get a set of results back. It's those results that you can then use to get to another one of our APIs called the Detail API. Detail API is actually aggregated data. I'm using that term a little bit loosely. Aggregated data, we're just saying that we get data from a lot of places and we're going to put it all together, but we're only going to give you the one organization name. Organization name is a good example of a piece of data that actually comes in on a lot of data sets that we consume. But through the Detail API, we'll give you the one, and we'll give you one address. The Exchange API is a little bit different. Exchange is driven purely on the nonprofit profiles themselves. So continue with the org name example. The organization name you will see in the Exchange API is the organization name that the user has advanced themselves through their profile. Same thing with any of the data, whether it be a revenue number, the name of their board members, that's the data that they type in, and that's the data that is available through the API. And that's really the differentiation between the Exchange API and the Detail API. Exchange is profile user advanced information only, but the Detail API will aggregate across our different data sources. Now we've come to the favorite part, is how would you implement our APIs? And here's some 6 high-level best practices. The presentation is for sort of a middle-of-the-road audience. We can go deeper technically if you ask those types of questions, but these are just some high-level best practices. So our first one is, want you to use API keys. The very first versions of our API supported username and password access. We thought that would be easiest for everyone, but it's inherently sort of vulnerable. So we unleashed the ability to use API keys in our next version. Now we still support username and password, but we want to deprecate that at some point in the future, so we would highly recommend that you use the API key access as opposed to username and password. The second bullet is, again, our preference. We would prefer that you use JSON. Now, right now we support both document returns, both JSON and XML. Someday in the future, we'd like to deprecate the support of the XML, so we prefer that you use JSON, but we're not really preachy about it. We just prefer it that way because it'll make it easier for us in the future when we want to deprecate XML. The other point here I'd like to make is, since our APIs support both the JSON and XML return, it's important you explicitly state what document type you want back through our API. If you were to use Internet Explorer to access one of our APIs right now and not specify the document type, Explorer would actually auto-negotiate and return JSON for you. But if you did the same thing in Google Chrome, it would be XML. So be sure to state what is the document that you want back, the document type rather. And if we had our preference, you'd want JSON, but it's up to you. The next most common thing we get asked through the API support is they want us to assist or help them with their search query. Now, the search query, we use Lucene query syntax. We support the full Lucene query syntax. We do have examples on data.guidestar.org of some basic Lucene queries. You can also Google Lucene query syntax, and there's all kinds of information about that. And of course, you can always just email us at apisupport@guidestar.org, and we can help you craft your query. But it's also important to know that it is Lucene query syntax. There's also a very special field in the search API. It's called participation. So through our nonprofit profile program, you can achieve different participation levels, either gold, silver, or bronze. I mentioned before that in the Exchange API, it's only data through the nonprofit profile program. That population is about 115,000 organizations, with about 45,000 achieving gold, silver, or bronze status. So how do you know when to call the Exchange API when you know that you can get a good return? That is this participation field. When there's a value in that participation field, you can successfully call the Exchange API and know you'll get a 200 response, as we say. And if it's empty, if you call the Exchange API, you'll get a 404 sad trombone because they actually don't have a profile. but that's how you know when to call it. The next two bullets actually have to do with what we would call, I'm going to throw up air quotes even though you can't see them, we're on the phone, we call these content APIs. Detail, Exchange, and Charity Check are key value stores. With Detail and Exchange are keyed off of an organization ID. It's just a generic ID that we assign people. So you're going to do a search, get your search results back. In that search results will be your organization ID. You take that ID and then you can call Detail or Exchange API. Charity Check is a little bit different. So Charity Check we decided to key off of EIN for a specific reason. The Charity Check product is a very specific use case. It's very EIN-centric. And we figured, hey, if you know the EIN, we're not going to make you do a search. Just go ahead and directly call the Charity Check API based on the EIN, and we'll return those values for you. So we sort of cut out a step there for you. So that's why there's the difference between those two keys. Now I'd like to welcome Emily to the session.
Thank you. And for those of you watching this, we have to explain the little inside joke about our celebrity spokespeople on this slide. When Ashley invited me to participate in the webinar, I was very honored to be included, and she asked me for a headshot. And I just told her to go ahead and Google Jennifer Lawrence and just use, pick one of those images. So here is the result of that suggestion. And for those of you who have not met Shane in person, his resemblance to George Clooney is uncanny. So
that's why he was the obvious choice for the headshot.
Those flinty eyes and that distinguished look. So for the next however many minutes we're talking here, picture us both as Oscar winners. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself. My name's Emily Iarocci. I'm the VP of Marketing and Communications at CyberGrant. And I've kind of been with the company since we began. Back in '99 is when we began, and as Ashley mentioned, I joined in 2000. And really when we started, there was already GuideStar. So their reputation has been impeccable. They're known as the leaders. We really respect them as an organization. And we regularly communicate and see what's new in the space, what new offerings they have, and other ways that we could potentially work together. And so I got brought in today to what I like to think of as dramatically reenact a recent conversation that our CyberGrants team had with GuideStar. So it's a little like the America's Most Wanted vignettes with no crime and way less tension. So some of the questions I'll be asking today are things that came up in our conversation, and they seem pretty germane to questions the GuideStar team gets regularly. So my first, and probably a lot of you are thinking this as well, is we're a grants management software provider. So cash, employee engagement, we have a lot of clients who are looking to collect their own stuff and get more information. So specifically, I'd be interested in knowing which API might be right for my organization, and probably a lot of you on the phone as well are seeing the list of choices and interested in how really to determine what would be the best fit or the best API to leverage. So how would we figure that out?
Well, specifically for your use case and the grants management vendors out there, I think you're probably familiar already with our Charity Check product. Before a grant maker actually disperses the funds or approves a grant, they need to make sure that that organization is in good legal standing, I guess, for lack of a better term. You need to verify that organization, and that's where Charity Check API comes in. Now, the second API that's probably of interest to you is our Exchange API, because that is part of the overall Simplify initiative that is attempting to streamline the grants application process throughout the sector. So as a grants management vendor, you're probably interested in those two APIs, Charity Check API and the Exchange API. For everyone else out there, I think what it basically comes down to is your use case. Are you looking to verify charities? Are you opening up a user selection sort of charity or organization portal? Is it an employee volunteering platform? So those are just the type of questions that you would ask yourself, and that'll lead you to what APIs should drive that particular use case.
All right, that's very helpful. So we at CyberGrant, like GuideStar, we leverage some of those databases that are kind of read-only, like the IRS Business Master File, the OFAC list. The thing that really makes you guys unique is that information that the organization is providing themselves. So they're going in there, they're updating that information. And one thing that we wanted to know was who's supplying that information, and how does GuideStar determine that they're actually authorized to do it? How do you know that, hey, it's not just somebody coming in and saying, hey, this organization is great, or this organization isn't great? How are you validating that it's actually an appropriate representative?
Well, I would say the short answer is very carefully, and the long answer is we manually vet every user that attempts to claim a nonprofit's profile on GuideStar.org. Typically, the process can take anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, and the levels of vetting are different depending on the type of organization that is attempting to claim their profile, the user that's going to claim their profile. So if a religious organization wants to claim their profile, and that type of organization will never appear on the business master file, we require that person to then provide us with additional documentation before we allow them to start inputting information in their profile. It could be that they're a newly formed 501c3 with a letter of determination in hand, but that the IRS has not yet listed them on the business master file. We we would make them fax that letter of determination over to us, so we simultaneously verify the user who is sending us the fax is indeed employed by them. And ultimately, we want to make sure that the user or the person that is claiming that profile is authorized to speak on behalf of that organization. We manually vet every single one of those users and those requests to claim those profiles.
All right, great. That's very reassuring. There's a lot of stuff in those exchanges. Does it include contact information? So maybe I'm not just doing research, but I am looking to reach out to one of those representatives. Am I getting email addresses, phone information, other information that's available? And also, how do I know that it's been updated pretty recently? I don't want to be calling a number that's been out of service for a few years. So do you have that information, first of all? And how recent is that? How would I know it was pretty recent?
Well, again, the short answer is yes, we do have contact information available through our Exchange API, which again is driven on the nonprofit profile. Now, I think I mentioned previously of the different participation levels you have within the profile program. If you're a bronze, silver, or gold, the requirement is you have to have an update within the last 2 years to maintain that status. The rest of the population, on the next version of the Exchange API, we're going to give you a timestamp on how current that data is, the last time it's been updated. So we'll leave the decision up to you on whether or not you want to use that information or not use the information. So anybody with a participation level, it's within the last 2 years, and everyone else, I'll give you a timestamp so you can determine whether or not actually contact information may not have changed in a long time.
So even if it's really old information, you'll still present it to me. I'll just know that it's old. It's not like after a few years you don't show it anymore. You're just showing that timestamp. So
correct. And your other indication will be if you're not a bronze, silver, or gold, then we term you a participant.
All right. That's helpful too. So like I mentioned earlier, you guys are collecting a lot of information directly from the nonprofit, not just the lists, but the information you're getting yourselves. A lot of our clients, and probably a lot of folks on the phone today, they have a lot of those kind of common fields, address, city, state, zip, et cetera, but they might be collecting information that is very specific to their individual programs isn't something that GuideStar is currently collecting and managing, but it might be something that would be valuable to you guys, or maybe other people in the space who are leveraging the GuideStar data would be interested in seeing too. So do the APIs support any sort of direct manual entry into the organizational listing, or can we feed some sort of different cool piece of information you're not currently capturing? Can we give that back to you for you to use?
Well, currently our APIs are read-only. However, on the roadmap is definitely to allow this read-write access through our APIs. We definitely want you to share information with. We'd love to augment our database with information that we're receiving through different and various platforms. One of the main challenges to opening up this read-write access is the verification of the user providing the data. As I mentioned before, we actually manually vet everyone we allow to input data into a nonprofit profile. So the first challenge that we have to overcome is the person entering information on your platform the person that we've authorized to give us information on that organization? And we believe that we can solve that challenge. However, that's the biggest thing standing in the way right now, but it is on our roadmap to allow this read-write access back, because we would love to allow that ability to push information to us from your platform.
And that sounds great. I know that we get similar kinds of requests, and there's a lot more to it than just like, hey, technically, can you do it? It's like privacy concerns and things like that. So I know it is not an easy question to solve, but I'm glad you guys are thinking about it, just given the climate of exchanging this information and a lot of people wanting to share and collaborate on some of these things. So I'm glad to hear that.
Absolutely.
Right.
And in some cases, it comes down to user experience. If you've got a user in the CyberGrant sandbox, you don't want to necessarily send them to GuideStar sandbox to update their profile so then you can turn around and call the API to get the updated information. You know, I think in the future, we want a seamless experience where they're entering information in the CyberGrant's platform and you're pushing information back to us as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. So another thing that's kind of a unique situation that we find, and we're asked about a lot, is this concept of national organizations and their chapter affiliates. Sometimes each of the affiliates has their own individual tax ID, so they'd sort of be recognized as their own entity. But you do have a situation like American Heart Association, for example, that has one tax ID, and all of the local chapters use that tax ID. So if I am using your system and trying to do research and get information on some of these affiliate chapters, how does GuideStar manage that? How does that present itself through this API exchange?
Well, right now, we support that affiliation or parent-subordinate, parent-child relationship, for lack of better terms right now, is the ones where the tax ID is different. Now, how that appears through the search API is that if you were to do a search, let's say of the Boston American Heart Association, in your search results, there's a field in there called Parents. And in that field, I'll give you the EIN of the parent organization, which you could then in turn call that particular organization's profile or what have you, but you'll know who the parent is through the search API. We currently don't support the scenario where, hey, we're all sharing the same API, but that is on the roadmap. Now, I think you'll see that functionality manifest itself first through our nonprofit profile or exchange API, as that is the data set that we control cradle to grave. I think that's where we can first start to easily represent and say, hey, I'm really the Boston American Heart Association, but my EIN is the exact same as the national chapter. So that's on the roadmap. We don't currently support it, but it's definitely in our future.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good, because I know that gets tricky too. I think a lot of us
yes.
here encounter
absolutely.
Like questions, just better ways that. So I'm glad it's on your horizon.
Yep.
So I'm sure a lot of the people who joined the webinar today clearly are interested in APIs, right? would we, CyberGrants, or the folks on the phone, how would we actually make this happen for real? So how do we engage you to start the conversation about doing the integration, and then what are some of the key milestones, deliverables, for lack of a better term, for the integration? What do we have to do to actually make the magic happen?
Well, great. It's all magical because, you know, all you have to do is just go to GuideStar.org, and our sandbox APIs are free. So you could go right now and load up your cart with a couple of sandbox APIs. That'll give you your API keys on My Account page, and then your developers can start integrating and testing right now. Our APIs are built on the RESTful APIs, as the industry calls them now. And you can start integrating immediately. Now from there, you know, you got the sales cycle and the process, but eventually we'll give you production APIs. API keys rather, and then all you have to do is just, I know all the engineers are laughing out there, but all you got to do then is just change your URLs from the sandbox to the production APIs, and it's as simple and as hard as that.
All right, so that was sort of my big final, like, how do we make it happen? And you're right, it doesn't sound, it sounds magical in that it sounds like it's actually very simple to do, not a Herculean effort from a technology standpoint, and that's always good to hear. So that's sort of my last question. George.
Great. I just clicked on the next slide. I think that was my cue.
That was your cue, Shane, to basically open this up to the audience now. We have a few minutes, and this is your time, everybody, to shine. Ask us a great question. If Shane can't answer it, well, then we can certainly provide you with some contact information so we can get the question answered in the near future. In the meantime,
there's a couple of great questions I see already flowing in. Now, some of them I feel like are the same, but basically around, hey, my users aren't going to know what organization they want to, so how do you go about implementing and doing those sorts of things? So obviously you're going to need a search API, because that is where it's going to act. Hey, my user wanted to find something on cancer or cancer organizations in Boston, and that's what's going to give you your first pass of here's a result set to give back to the users. Now, again, the API is just a data transmission protocol, so the implementation on how the user that can filter or resubmit those search results is totally up to you, but we'll definitely give you those information. Now, the more information you can provide a search engine, the better your results will be. For example, everyone's gone to Google who knows everything about everyone, and you just have to type in something like the United Way, and it's going to give you the United Way that's closest to you. If you were just to come to GuideStar and type in United Way, we'll probably give you as the first result the biggest United Way, or the United Way we have the most information on. Well, that might not be the one the user is looking for, but through your application, if you know the city, or you know the cause area, or you know any more information other than United Way, that's going to make that search experience that much better for your user. And from there, it depends. You know, grants management vendors are going to use the Exchange API as part of the Simplify initiative to streamline the grants management. You could use the Detail API, which actually has that aggregated data. The population of available organizations at Detail API is around 2 million organizations, so a lot of people sort of fall into that, or they'll use a combination of all the APIs to create the experience that they want for their users.
Shane, how do we get to your free sandbox?
You go to GuideStar.org. And if you're not registered, register and go to the products page. And then you go to the API section, and then you can add it to your cart. We will, or can we post the link directly to that products page into the chat window, perhaps?
This one right
Perfect.
here. We can do that. Stay tuned, audience.
The wonders of technology.
Isn't that great?
Any other questions?
What else do we see coming in here?
Here's a good one.
Oh, one about OFAC. Fantastic. What is the OFAC check? So as part of the Cherry Check API, what we're going to give you is an OFAC field. It's going to say yes or no. has this organization been tagged by the Office of Foreign Assets Control? Yes or no? And it's that simple. And if yes, don't stop what you're doing and don't give it to that organization.
So that match is purely on the organization name?
Yes, on organization, we do the vetting and make sure that we're getting the correct organization. That is actually a manual process, so I don't know, I'm sure more than one person on the phone subscribes to the OFAC sort of alerting process. You get the email, we do a double check, we do a triple check, say, okay, it's in fact this organization, and we flip the database and push it downstream that this organization is now, has been OFAC'd, if you will.
Do you do any matches on like the contact names?
Not yet, but
okay.
We are definitely, that's not something that's on the roadmap yet, but we've definitely been looking at that. So there's a question now about the different categories of NPOs. It looks like something based on NTEE codes. The NTEE code is available through the APIs. I don't think that we have the documentation of those categories on data.guidestar.org, but that's something that is very easy for us to do, and perhaps we should do it. Take that note. We'll post some list of NTEE codes on the data.guidestar.org. Make it a little bit easier.
Note taken. Thank you so much to Alex. All right, last chance. Get your questions in.
All right. Again, I've mentioned it a few times, https data.guidestar.org is our API developer page. We got some documentation there. We are beefing up that documentation by the day and building out, make it more robust. So come back every day. And if you ever get stuck, you can always email APIsupport@guidestar.org, and we'll get an answer back to you as soon as we can. I'd also like to thank you very much, Emily, for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to you both, Emily and Shane. This was really excellent. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. I hope that you all found this as informative as I did. So we did cover a lot, and I wanted to say what I mentioned before, you will receive an email within 48 hours with a link to the recording of today's event to refer back to as needed. That email will also include the slides from today, and in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me, Ashley Early, and I will be happy to put you in touch with our data architect or one of our appropriate business development managers here with GuideStar. Thanks again, everyone, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.